Hello Chem 1A, this is Chapter 1, Lecture Video 7, and we're going to be talking about how to deal with sig figs when doing actual math now. So, like I said in the last lecture video, sig figs really only become a thing when we have two measurements that we're adding or subtracting or multiplying or dividing. And when we do, we have to consider the sig figs in both numbers and get an answer that corresponds to the rules that we have for addition, subtraction, or multiplication or division. Now, the rule for addition and subtraction is that the last digit will be in the same place as the last digit of the least certain measure. Now, that is a bit wordy and hard to understand. So let's do an example. If we're adding these two numbers, right, this guy and this guy, then I need to consider which one's the least certain measure. Now, if we look at this number, this one's accurate to the hundredths place, but this number is only accurate to the tenths place. So when I do my addition, I get this value, but I need to round to the least accurate number's digit, which would be the tenths in this case, because tenths is less accurate than hundredths. So I'm going to take this and round it to the tenths, and my correct answer should be 27.2. This works for both addition and subtraction. Another way, and one that I think the textbook often says, is that when we do these types of calculations, we have the same number of decimal places as the quantity carrying the fewest decimal places. So for instance, in these two numbers, if we're adding them, one of them has 2 decimal places, one of them has 3, we would round to the less, so 2. I honestly prefer the accuracy one to the decimal places one, because if you don't have any decimal places and you're adding two numbers that don't have any, what do? Well, you'd still use this accuracy version. So in this case, the top number is accurate to the thousandths, the bottom one is accurate to the hundredths, so I must round my number to the hundredths place, or in other words, the second decimal place, giving us 7.60 kilometers as our correct answer. All right. One of the biggest confusions with sig figs and problems for students is remembering the differences between addition and subtraction and multiplication and division. We have two separate rules. Notice that when we're adding and subtracting numbers, we actually don't care how many significant figures those numbers have. We just care about what the least accurate decimal place is. This is important to remember, as multiplication and division do take into account sig figs, and our rule for multiplication and division is that the number with the least number of significant figs will be the answer's number of sig figs. So in other words, if I take two numbers, I need to count and multiply them, and I need to count their significant figures. So this first number here has 3 sig figs. The second one has 2. When I multiply these together, I need to round to the number of least sig figs. In other words, I need to round my answer to 2 significant figures. So this would be 0.60 meters squared as my correct answer for this multiplication problem. All right, let's do another example. What if we're dividing? Dividing follows the same rule. So we need to count how many significant figures each of our numbers that we're dividing have. For instance, this one has 4, this one has 2. This means I need to round my answer to 2 significant figures. 2 significant figures would be rounding to the 2 here in the number, which would mean 1200 meters per second is my correct answer, because that number has only 2 significant figures. All right, let's do one more example problem to illustrate a point. What happens if we have both addition and subtraction, or addition and multiplication going on in the same problem? Well, we need to remember PEMDAS. Which rule do we follow? It depends on the order that we do them in, and we have to follow both rules, addition, subtraction, and multiplication, division, but in order of the order of operations. I have this memorized as PEMDAS, which is an acronym standing for parentheses first, then exponents, then multiplication or division, then addition or subtraction. One of the other things that you need to understand here is that we do not round until the end if we have multiple calculations in our problem. So in other words, I'm going to add these two values together. I'm going to add these two values together because they are in the parentheses. Now, if I do that, we're going to see those values here. Now, notice that I've highlighted a number in both these values. I cannot round these numbers yet, even though my rule of subtraction tells me that this one should be rounded to 2 decimal places, hence the yellow here, and this one should be rounded to the ones place, hence the yellow there. I can't round them yet, so I need to note them to myself as I do the problem so that I can round at the very end to the correct number of significant figures. You cannot round to the correct place right off the bat here and then multiply out. You will get a wrong answer because this is a different number from this, and our rule is that we round at the end for this reason. So next I go, okay, well, this one has 3 significant figures because this is my last significant one. This one has 3 significant figures because that's my last significant one. So my answer must have 3 significant figures, making that my last significant digit. In other words, 1220 is the correct answer here. All right, so if you have any questions at all, please let me know. I'm always happy to help.